Well, hello and welcome to this episode of the CPO Perspective. And I'm delighted to welcome another European guest, Kasper Larsen. And let's see what we chat about. Kasper, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and hello, everybody. My name is Kasper Larsen from Denmark. I have a master's in international business, worked with multiple companies in Denmark, and I'm happy to be here.
Very good. And look, the question I always love to hear, because, so many leaders in our profession have very different journeys to become, CPOs or heads. What was where did you start life? Did you always dream of being a CPO as a child, or did you start in a different place?
Well, I started in a completely different place. I was actually planning to be a mechanic or engineer, but then somehow I ended up being a CPO. I didn't have a career plan or anything. It kind of evolved through the years after I took my master's in international business. Um, I applied for a job, I got it, and then from there it kind of just went its own way. What I knew early on was I always wanted to be in a position where I had a significant impact on the business I was working for and the business performance. That was really what motivated me to work and to seek more and more senior positions. But it was not with a plan of being a CPO. But I found out, through the years, that a lot of hard work, put in the hours, took the opportunities when they arrived, but also sometimes I actually actively tried to create the opportunities myself that put me into positions where I had that possibility to impact the business.
Got it. And just give us a feel for the sort of the industries that you've worked through in your time.
Well, I worked for a small time in the chemical business as a product manager in the Scandinavian areas for something called Helm AG, Helm Scandinavia. But after that, I went to Vestas for the wind turbine. And I've basically been in that space within power the last 20 years, whether it's wind turbines or whether it's grid. I worked in something called Energinet, the Danish TSO, that takes care of all the transmission lines, electricity lines, and also gas lines. Yeah.
Got it. And okay, so look, the big question, and it's the one that I love asking senior people. When you look at procurement today, what's on your mind? What's your feeling about where we are at the moment?
Well, there's many things going on in the world today, but for sure, um, in the current global environment, you need to mention risk and compliance as two main topics for sure. So with the risk, you see everything from the war in the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, the political gap that's increasing between US and Europe, or China and the Western world, the pandemic and so forth. And compliance, especially if you're in the European Union, there's a lot of compliance and function you need to live up to. So those are two big themes, but there's actually for me a more overarching theme I see is more important, and that's actually AI.
Really?
And AI it's how do you embed it directly into your business model, into your processes, into your ways of working in a procurement or sourcing organization? That for me is actually top of mind. And for the reason for me seeing this as the most important thing is actually multiple, but there's two overarching themes I'm looking at. I strongly believe if a company or sourcing organization do not understand to embed AI into their business, in a few years, you will have a competitive disadvantage. Um, I see AI changing the world more than what you saw when Henry Ford introduced the mass manufacturing of cars, or even when the iPhone was introduced. This will just be faster and have an even bigger impact in the coming years. So that's kind of one element. This is about a competitive advantage slash disadvantage if you don't get into it. The other one is actually the hunt for talent, which I see becoming more and more difficult. The younger generations, they have been brought up in a digital time, so they expect that new technologies are available for them when they work. And if you do not have that in place, you risk losing losing to attract them or retain them in the company. So for me, that's why you really need to work with AI. If you then look a little more into it, I also really believe that somehow procurement functions always have a challenge in getting a seat at the table or a voice at the table, call it what you
Right.
want.
Yeah.
And here I actually see also AI as an enabler for this. So I really believe if you don't change, if you're not having AI embedded now or start working with it, you will not be ready to change your sourcing organizations so that your value proposition will fit your company in the future. Um,
Right.
for me, again, I see sourcing and procurement functions and the skill set is going to change dramatically over the next years. I believe in the old days or the current days, for example, a hardcore negotiation skills is important. Excel skills are important. But in the future, I actually believe something like a relationship management, communication, project management skills are some of the most important skill sets in the future. And that's because AI will do a lot of the preparation for negotiation. It will do a lot of the negotiation also. It will do the analysis, but you need to be able to ask the right questions. You need to understand how to validate the answers, and then you need to be able to communicate these analysis and result that's coming up. That will show the value proposition
Got it.
for the company you work in. You'll be able to digest much more data, much more faster, that makes you relevant for the rest of the organization and gives you this critical voice at the table.
Do you know?
That's where
Oh,
you really have the possibility to impact the company. So you have the right place and the right time. That is what AI can help you with.
so look, I'm really interested in this your view that AI, yeah, okay, it bringing it in will enable maybe not competitive advantage because everyone else is doing it, but will prevent competitive disadvantage. But I'm interested in this talent. You said that if you don't have it, you're reducing your attractiveness to Gen Z, Gen Alpha as they come in. What's your view on balancing the attractiveness of AI to Gen Z and perhaps some of the worry, risk, or threat that perhaps Gen X see in AI who are less comfortable? Do you see a different reaction or a challenge in balancing that?
I definitely see that the younger generation, I believe they are simply brought up in a digital time, so they are not so scared of it. They use it. They expect it to be there. It's more the generations like myself and older that's a little more scared or have a reluctance to use it. And of course you need to figure out to how you bridge that gap between the different generations. But at least for me, when I look at working with AI, I think it's important that when you as a company start embedding it into your the organizations, you should always say, do not trust it 100%, and that's actually okay. Just see it as something that gives you a lot of data, a lot of information really quick. So your time to market, so to say, your time to whatever you're making will be a lot faster. You just need to make sure you actually learn how to ask the right questions, and then you need to learn or remember to validate the answers. Those are two critical points in the AI. So do not trust it 100%, and also accept that in some cases it's actually okay that you only get an 80 or 90% right answer, but it's enough for getting you to the next stage where you maybe before didn't have all those information available. So for me, when I think the misconception for me is that sometimes we think that AI is primarily benefiting the younger generations, but I actually think, yeah, of course, it's easier for them to start working with it because they're used to all this digital age. But I think the more experienced people, they actually misinterpret that what they can gain from this. Because if you do not know what to ask, and if you do not know how to validate the answers, you will not get the best outcome. And for asking the questions and validating the answers, you actually require knowledge and experience. And this is where I really see that the older generation can benefit a lot if they just dare to start jumping into it and actually
Right.
accept it's not 100%.
In other words, there's hope for me yet. As the older generation.
There's a lot of hope. I would say I was also skeptical in the start, but
Yeah,
after starting to work with it, I actually found myself being really surprised how much data, how quicker I could work in many cases if I just learned how to ask the questions and, of
I
course, remember to validate.
yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, I use it all the time now, and I started from a position of skepticism. And like you, I think that the shock is realizing that when you combine knowledge of the profession and an understanding of what's going on with the ability to do so much research and comparison of information and analysis of just so quickly, if you can bring those two things together, it's like a super.
It is like a superpower. I have a quick example, actually. Half a year ago, I was sitting with a global supplier, and both me and the CEO of that company really enjoyed AI. And we were talking over dinner in the evening, and next morning we were going to have the business meeting. So I went home in the evening and started doing a prompt on a company search, searching all the details, relevant details for this company just for fun. So I was doing that in the evening and the morning before I went to work. And I ran a prompt just before the meeting, and we went into this business meeting. And there was a break during the meeting where I showed the CEO the outcome of the prompt. And the CEO, he was reading through it, and he was like, "Holy moly, how long time
Yeah,
have you
well,
used on this?" And he said, basically 95% of that analysis, and that was completely correct and gave a really broad picture of that company. There was only 5% that was not okay. Could I live with 5% not being okay? Yeah, because otherwise I would not
absolutely.
have been able to do that analysis. I didn't have the time.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I just if I just take a slightly a different question, I talk to lots of CPOs, and there are some who are going down the route of they've got existing big end-to-end platforms sitting on top of ERP, and they're going down the route of just adopting the AI that's being added into those platforms, and at the other end you've got people to say, well, actually, no, we're just going to treat what we've got as like a process spine. But what we're doing is we're adding best of breed AI platforms, and we're integrating it with orchestrators, of which there are many, and they're growing. Just what I'm genuinely interested. What's your view of the right, if there is such a thing as the right way to go, or what's your take on how teams should adopt AI? Is it, because there are two extremes, and I'm sure there's many in the middle.
I don't think there is a right or wrong answer here. I think, well, there's one wrong is you don't start using AI. So
Right.
it really depends on your business and the processes or no, actually more the systems you have. So of course, if there is AI embedded into some of the more legacy systems, you should enable it, but you should also enable some of the other things, because if you have AI inside a system, it always only is inside that system. And where some of this best of breed or some of these orchestra they can help, that is actually they can, if you allow them to go in behind your firewall, they can actually then go across some of the data you have and help there. So it really depends on your system, but I would say both. You should
Yeah.
you should
Right.
try and play with. Of course, your IT department should figure out how do you make sure your data is safe. That's really a big question right now. But of course, you can always start with the AI outside your firewall and get a lot of knowledge on the markets you could still utilize. So that's a good way of just getting started without risking any data breach, I would say.
Got it. And if I go to the complete opposite side, you stress the importance of soft skills, relationship building, judgment, communication, engagement, problem solving. Again, there's a general observation, and the problem with generalizations is they're always wrong. But that at the same time as Gen Z are super comfortable with technology, they expect to see AI. They're not as comfortable in some of those soft skills, particularly communication and influencing. With is that your experience? And if it is, what's your approach to trying to address that skill gap, that soft skill gap in the upcoming generation?
I would actually say it's not only the upcoming generation, it's also sometimes the older generation. This is
Right.
about communication and also this about stakeholder management, the more soft skills where at least in the past, many of the sourcing and procurement functions, they would train you in the more hard skills. So for me, in my past role and the role before that, we actually started training the organizations within project management, within communication, stakeholder management. We also used a lot of time working on what we call ways of working. That's basically sort of a values of how we expect the organizations to work. So we actually start training our organization much more in the soft skills. Of course, we still had some of the hard skills, but we started focusing equally on the soft skills in our trainings because it was a lack not only for the young generation but also for the older.
Right. And do you, I mean, I suppose it's like anything. I mean, you're trying to achieve everybody comes up together. So, older generation focus on getting them comfortable and recognizing actually they have got a potential superpower with their knowledge. Younger generation, comfort with technology, maybe sometimes not so comfortable. And of course, at the same time, as you said, we're dealing with massive risk outside. And I'm interested in your view of how you balance the need for procurement teams to just be so focused on firefighting at the moment. I mean, solving problems, some new challenge every single day, at the same time as being able to take a step back and, invest the time in training and development. And we know we need to do both, but often the firefighting takes over everything. How do you approach getting that balance right between serving the business but also investing to improve to be able to serve the business better?
Well, it's a good question and a generic challenge with many organizations are facing. Um, the way we work with it is it was more long term. That was actually setting up the organization in a way so there was time to also not only to firefight but also to work with these training and development and more excellence skill
Right.
set.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that took some years because we were really trying to the more senior people we had. We were trying to make actually more layers in our organization so that you would have more junior positions taking more of the firefighting before they were escalated to make sure that the
Ah,
more senior
okay.
positions would
Right.
be have time to work more strategically. So and then we would also in my organization always have an excellence team, which we actually try to put a lot of the budget into because we believe that it enabled the rest of the organizations to be much more efficient.
Do you know, I just want to explore something you said there because I've never heard it before. One of the things that you mentioned earlier, judgment. The thing that you and I have got and our generation is we've been through the journey without technology. We've done the firefighting, done all the difficult stuff. So we've built experience. And a lot of people are saying actually the challenge for the upcoming generation is because technology is doing so much, their opportunity to learn is more limited. But you just said something interesting, which is you're actually making a point of every time there's a firefight of getting the new people, the younger generation to focus on it, because I guess that if there is a chance to gain experience, you should give it to the younger people first to get on with it. Was that a deliberate decision, or is that just something that's just happened because it made sense?
It was actually not necessarily just the younger generation. It was more the junior positions or
Junior,
lower
sorry,
positions.
good
So you
clarification.
could have
Okay,
people that were a little bit older also.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But what I will say is what I really believe is in diversity in my teams. And diversity for me here is not only male and female. It's age, it's education, uh, um, culture, it's
yeah.
where you're from in the world, and so forth. I actually believe a lot in that, and that actually bridges part of what you're saying because you need both. You need some young people with a lot of energy and a passion and knows, in this case, digitalization and AI, so forth, and then you also need some older ones which actually knows. how the business is working, and I tried it before. So having that mix in an organization, I see as crucial also in the future.
Right.
Um,
So look, thank you for sharing. As a final question, if you were talking to someone just coming out of university, thinking about taking their first steps in procurement, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give someone just starting on their procurement journey?
that's a good question. Um, I strongly believe that for you to succeed, it's important that you are motivated in general, because motivation often leads to performance. So that means for me, it's about that you need to make sure your head, your stomach, and your heart is aligned, so to say. So does it feel right? Does it seem right? Logically also. So and if it's not in some shape or form, what are you going to do about it? And when I say about it, it's not only about changing a company, it's also maybe it's different tasks you get inside your current position. Is there something you can do so you can get into a different position in your company? Is it something would require you to change to a different company? It can be different things, but for sure you need to be aligned, and then of course you need to be open and honest towards your manager, so and come in good time so you can find the solutions together to get you into positions and tasks that's motivating for you. Not every day will be equal motivating, but in general, you need to be motivated because you need to work for many years, and we also know motivation leads to performance. So that would be my advice: make sure that it feels right, and both inside and also in your head. Yeah.
That's a lovely piece of advice. Well, look, Kasper, thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for sharing your thoughts and experience through a wonderful career. And to those that are watching, if you would like to join us and share your perspective, your view on our wonderful profession, please just drop me a line. But until next time, see you soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.